Now, Nancy Pelosi's announcement comes without any talks of retirement for the long-serving leader, who remains an influential lawmaker and pivotal party figure and strong fundraiser for Democrats. It also unfolds as Washington is grappling with the sunset of political era and as older generation leaders, including Biden, face questions about their age. This past week, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said he would finish his term as a leader despite concerns about his recent health episodes. Pelosi has long charted her own course from her arrival in Congress as one of the few women elected to the House to her tenure as one of the most influential women in U.S. politics. Pelosi stepped away from the day-to-day political limelight after a younger generation of Democrats took charge in 2023. So what do you think, folks? Should Nancy Pelosi be the Republican, be the leader again? Lawmakers are being urged to take action as soon as possible. Democrats and Republicans are starting up negotiations again over the next government funding bill. The members have confirmed that they will not drop demands on spending cuts to key areas of the government. Now, some GOP senators have stated that Chuck Schumer was trying to reenact a government shutdown as a means to help him hang on to the Senate. Senator Blackburn's claim comes as the United States is gearing for another election year, with Republicans hoping to win the majority in the Senate, keep a majority in House of Representatives. Blackburn stated that she believes that the person who is really pushing for a government shutdown is Schumer so that he can remain in the Senate majority for next year as well. The Tennessee senator added that the United States have fallen and the United States inflation is greatly impacting everyday life and the effects of gas and rising price of groceries. Schumer said that the raised Appropriations Committee Patty Murray and Susan Collins helped pass the bills. Now, Schumer warned the Republican-controlled House should follow the Senate's incredible lead and pass their appropriations bill to avoid a necessary government shutdown. Schumer warned the demands rolled out last month by conservative House Freedom Caucus cannot pass and that a shutdown would harm the nation. Now, government funding expires September 30th, and the House Freedom Caucus has formally cited plans to oppose any government funding bill that doesn't meet a series of conditions. Now, those included the top-line discretionary funding level between lowering to $4 trillion, below the $1.5 trillion top-line number that Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy agreed to earlier this year. So while funding for the VA passed on party lines, House leadership canceled an expected vote on funding to the Department of Agriculture due to a lack of consensus within the GOP caucus. The same dynamic affects the other 10 spending bills as well. The debate over spending levels will likely be a legislative battleground for the next few months, as it's vital for Americans to understand what it's at stake. There's been ongoing negotiations between Kevin McCarthy and other Democrats as well. Now, the Freedom Caucus has pushed for a reduction to 2022 levels, with Republicans agreeing to pass it. Unfortunately, this flawed a bipartisan debt limit deal, and now the Save, Grow, and Plant process set to $10 billion in budget gimmicks. This meant that not only would it be a type of spending cut, but the inflationary defensive spending would actually be lowered. Now, the House Appropriations Committee has now proceeded and produced initial versions of all 12 of the annual spending bills in response to members of the Freedom Caucus. According to one expert, the spending bills as they currently stand provide plenty of details to inform leaders and negotiators about the worthwhile spending reductions already into place. Spending reductions in the House include a 15% cut to the Department of Education and a 12% cut to housing programs.
Now, on one final matter, violent crime in some American cities has grown so rampant, even the local media are struggling to keep up. Last month, a Chicago news crew was filming a story about armed robbery when they themselves became the victims of armed robbery. This is a city where Democrats recently swapped out a mayor who famously refused to let law enforcement do their job for one who called defunding the police a, quote, real political goal. Unfortunately, millions of Americans live under liberal local leaders who would rather bend to soft-on-crime radicalism than keep their streets safe. Last year, here in Washington, the U.S. Attorney declined.
We have a ton of good news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, and SSI and SSDI. Now, if you guys want to know the latest news about the fourth stimulus check, then continue watching this video. Biden is taking huge action this week to fight inflation, and the Biden administration has confirmed that addressing inflation and helping low-income households financially are their top priorities. Several new relief programs are being established this month. Confronted with a sharp decline in approval ratings and the relentless increase in consumer prices, President Biden is finally shifting to full inflation fighting mode with a month-long campaign intent to contain public outrage over the rising cost of everyday goods. The White House is taking steps to calm voters and their worries about surging inflation. They are signaling that Biden understands what U.S. households are enduring and that officials are maximizing efforts to bring prices under control. This comes ahead of the midterm elections. Just last week, Biden held a rare Oval Office meeting with Jerome Powell. Central bank officials hiked interest rates again on May 4th, lifting them by 50 basis points for the first time in 2 decades. Jerome Powell has said inflation is much too high, and the Fed has also announced plans to begin running down its massive $9 trillion balance sheet. The inflation report in April showed that prices cooled off a bit, but remain near a 40-year high. Core prices, which exclude gas and food, also accelerated more than expected, underscoring how strong inflationary pressures in the economy still are. With Biden's approval rating sinking to its low, the Biden administration finally has a brand new plan to fight inflation and help the American people. Millions of Americans may get extra $225 stimulus checks under this new stimulus proposal. Millions of people could get millions of Americans could also get additional cash payments of $225 under a new proposal. That comes as red-hot inflation continues, and qualifying residents in Indiana may soon see the relief. Indiana's Republican governor is also proposing a plan to send $225 payments to people in the state amid the highest inflation since 1981 by tapping into the state's growing budget surplus. The governor said he will call for a special legislative session before the end of June, so lawmakers can consider and potentially act on a plan that will total $1 billion in budget surpluses. He said Indiana residents have real needs right now during this period of high inflation, from the gas pump to buying groceries, and everyone should benefit from the state's success. The $225 check comes after about 4.3 million of the state's taxpayers began receiving $125 payments last month under the same law. According to the governor's office, if it's approved, each Indiana resident who has filed 2021 taxes would be eligible to now receive a combined total of about $350 in payments. Married couples filing jointly would also receive about $700. The additional deposit will be made to the bank accounts of eligible residents in Indiana who have filed their tax returns. And that's the good news I want to hear from everybody. Now, skyrocketing gas prices is definitely a huge problem for the White House, and while the administration began the month by pivoting heavily toward its economic message, experts say the attempt has so far fallen flat, especially as the national average for a gallon of gas hits a record of $5. Along with inflation, that presents a major political challenge for Biden Democrats. The White House is showing signs that it is seriously considering a federal gas tax holiday. President Biden's economic team has discussed the gas tax holiday recently, and is expected to meet later this week for further talks. The White House is under political pressure to do something to provide relief to Americans dealing with high inflation and rising gas prices. The economic